Chair of Labour CND. Many of you will know Joy as an activist in Sussex, based in the Worthing area. She's been a very prominent anti-Guantanamo campaigner, and she's been a tireless supporter of the Save Shaker Aamer campaign. And I think they're probably the main themes that she's going to talk about today. So, Joy Hurcombe.
Thank you. I was going to comment about the Calais camp just before I began what I prepared to say, and I hope you forgive me if I read. But a lot of those refugees at Calais are Afghani, and they're there because of the war that we created, and we're still there in Afghanistan, destroying their homes, and destroying the people, and destroying their future. And we need to remember that when there is so much injustice just across in France, in Calais. First of all, thank you for inviting me today, and it's an opportunity for us to meet at very important and dangerous times. One of the most dangerous times in recent history. It's as if we're sleepwalking again to war in Iraq and also in Syria. And as a member of NATO, we are prepared for conflict on the borders of Russia. And also, one thing we haven't mentioned, as the US start squaring up to China in the South China Sea. We do not seem to learn from our mistakes. We go for intervention. We go for a military option. We think that we can continue to stride on the world, as Pruna has said, in a colonial fashion. Since 9/11, we've been involved in 3 major wars, in Iraq, Afghanistan, and in Libya. Bush and Blair created the war on terror so that they could violate international law. The US and the UK became complicit in the use of torture and rendition to torture. And in the UK, we have seen the erosion of our basic civil liberties. And the reason why that is because they always say for national security. And now, law-abiding, peaceful protesters are threatening the state if they protest against fracking, or if they march. If they march against the war against the Palestinians in Gaza. Intolerance and prejudice is supported by the gutter press against asylum seekers and migrants. And only last week, there was a death in custody of a man, a 26-year-old man, who died from neglect in a custody suite, in a custody centre in Lancashire. He came from Bangladesh seeking a better life. So legislation is used to restrict our human rights. And there's virtually very little opposition. We've seen now house arrests coming back, control orders, where people are put in detention without knowing the end of the detention, without knowing why they've been detained, without the opportunity to face any charges. And we can anticipate more loss of civil liberties as the government increases the idea of the terror threat, now apparently at severe, although apparently there's no terror threat imminent. Crazy, disaffected kids are threatened with becoming stateless, and they have no appeal. So this is the political climate at the moment, where David Cameron overruled his own Foreign Secretary, Philip Hammond, not William Hague, he's gone, but Philip Hammond, who is even more of a hawk, and said, oh, all options are on the table for military intervention once more in Iraq. President Obama, who prefers to have his weekly meetings so he can decide who on the kill list is next for being droned, which is summary execution, not dissimilar to being executed by sword, and there's no opportunity to say that you are not involved and you are executed, or maybe the wedding party, sorry, we thought it was a meeting of the Taliban, and there's no interest in opposition. They go around the world, even though they are a failed empire. Failure doesn't matter. In fact, the fact that they are there, still creating havoc throughout the world, failure is what they want. They want a failed state in Iraq. They want a failed state in Afghanistan. And in Libya, the failed state in Libya means that there's more opportunity for selling arms, for profiting from oil, from wealth, from strategic interests in mineral resources, and from the Libyan government, incidentally, now operates from a car ferry off the coast of Tobruk. The savage cuts in our welfare provision. These have been forced through to pay for wars. Austerity affects the poorest in our society. Cuts in wages were praised by Mark Carney, who's now the Canadian head of the Bank of England. He said to the Trade Union Congress, austerity cuts have helped our competition, our competitiveness. Well, meanwhile, the bankers, weighed down with their heavy bonuses, are laughing all the way to the bank. We live in a very unequal society. The top 10% own 42% of this country's wealth. The bottom 50% own only 10%. And that was a recent study by the university in London, the LSE. I'm not very good at acronyms. LSE, London School of Economics. Money for wars is always available. Jerry spoke about the 2% extra each country has to be committed to the NATO budget. And guess what? The money for wars doesn't come from the defence budget, the 34% of 34 billion that is the defence budget of this country. Incidentally, it's the fourth largest military budget in the world, even though they've had a cut of 8%. Money comes from another source. It comes from the Treasury reserves. So it's all right then. If we carry on with this policy of military intervention as the first and only option, there will be further financial and personal cost borne by the poor. Austerity cuts, deeper than we have seen already, will be our reward for failing to object, failing to answer those that say something has to be done. It's a very unsafe world. So what is there to be done? We have to protest. And if our politicians won't listen, we have to go on the streets. So I'm saying to you, please support Stop the War Coalition, CND and Labour CND. The UK could act for peace. 2 minutes. It could stop supporting the US in the use of military force. It could get out of NATO. It could condemn the use of torture. And it could condemn the continued existence of torture in Guantanamo. We could bring Shaker Aamer back to his home in this country. And I have to tell you, it's a very hard act to follow, but Caroline Lucas has been one of our greatest supporters in our campaign for Shaker Aamer. He's been in Guantanamo for nearly 14 years. 13 years in Guantanamo, despite the fact he has been cleared. And the UK, David Cameron himself, had said that it's a priority that he should be brought back to this country. He said that 2 years ago. He's still there. And I know that you'll want to vote for Puna in the elections, and I can assure you that whoever you vote for in Brighton Pavilion, you will get a very good MP. Our work for peace is above politics. We have to keep on trying to prevent this drift to war. I'd like to end with, if I may, a letter written to the Morning Star by Chris, who I think was at the last meeting here, when we had the opportunity to hear from Bob Crow at the 30th anniversary of the miners' struggle. These are his words. Urging us all to stay true to the ideals of truth and justice, no matter how isolated in the memory, how isolated in the minority or under attack we may sometimes feel. Bob Crow said that the better world he believed in might not come about in his lifetime, but it would come if people continue to fight for it. And that's why we're here today.